Hello, my loves, and welcome to the Native Growth Podcast. I'm your hostess, Lauren Jean Brapson, and I'll cover the spectrum of personal and spiritual growth topics and processes born from the human experience, the lessons of Mother Earth, and the universal laws and truths that underline them. I'm spilling all the tea, no reservations. I hope this podcast empowers you to live your fullest potential, your innate manifestation, your native growth. Thank you so much for joining me from wherever you are in time and space, and I hope you enjoy the show. All right, so thank you again so much for joining me for this very first official episode. I saw that a number of you had listened to and downloaded the first episode, which was just kind of, I guess, like a mini intro episode. Thank you so much for everyone who has listened and engaged and downloaded. Thank you so much to everyone who has sent me emails and DMs with comments and questions and all kinds of things. And thank you also so much to everyone who's been following along and being so patient while I work through just a whole bunch of technical difficulties and some aspects of my own kind of like winter season that I've been going through internally a little bit while I've been working on just getting ready for this first official episode and I guess the official launch of this podcast. I really appreciate every single one of you so much for being here and being patient and for all that you do. So welcome to this very first official episode. I guess you could say it's episode like 1.5. And this season is very much inspired by just kind of honestly like the stage of life that I'm in right now. So this episode is all about embracing your seasons. So here we go. So like I said, it's very much inspired by where I've been at in my life for especially the last few days while I've been integrating with a lot of changes that have gone on over the last couple of months. But since it's really about embracing all of your seasons, you could say that it's very much inspired by kind of the whole last like 12 months that I've had. This last year really for me has been a total whirlwind, and I've seen so many of the seeds that I've planted for my manifestations come to fruition, and it's been super exciting. And yet at the same time to have so many things like manifesting and growing and expanding all at the same time, and then all of a sudden kind of moving into this super deep like internal winter season, and to do that around the same time that physical winter hit is just like it's a little bit of like mental emotional whiplash. And not a bad thing at all, which is why I'm calling this embracing your seasons. So to give you a little bit of context, so at this same time last year, I was living alone. I had been single for about 2.5 years after the passing away of my previous boyfriend in a motorcycle crash in 2020. So I was living alone, but doing just a lot of really good, deep, like gratitude work, really feeling like I was in a solid place in my life. I was working a regular day job in addition to kind of building my business a little bit on the side, taking some energy healing clients here and there, taking some coaching clients kind of here and there, making and selling some bath and body products here and there, just kind of appreciating being able to dabble in a little bit of everything and not really having to take anything too seriously. But at the same time, at this time last year, I was starting to feel like, okay, I think I might be, really ready for like a new partnership. I might be really ready to let that kind of romantic love back into my life. And it really helped that I had had my dog for about a year and a half by that point. So, really opened the gateway for me to remember that, like I am love, therefore I'm worthy of giving and receiving unconditional love, and that I have more than enough capability to do that for myself and for another being, for another soul. And so that kind of started to become something that I integrated into my manifestations in addition to the building of my business, was that I would find like a really good partnership. And in March, I met the man who's now my husband less than a year later. Again, like kind of a whirlwind. Like we dated for like 6 seconds. We were engaged for like 4 seconds and we got married in about 4 seconds. Like it all happened really kind of quickly, but in very much a beautiful, natural, organic, divine way. All again, like lots of crazy things, but all really great things. Early on in our dating relationship, I got in this really crazy car accident. That was actually really scary. But I didn't have a scratch on me. I was totally fine. I got jostled around. I needed some acupuncture and some chiropractic for a little bit, but I was totally fine. But that was a huge shift in my season, kind of like spurred by that car accident because it happened right at kind of like the front of the neighborhood where I lived at the time. And so not only was it like, okay, well, now my car is totaled. So there's kind of like this season of shifting cars, which like I don't really have a whole lot of attachment to physical objects, but it just was kind of, I don't know, it's an adjustment because at the time, commuting and doing so much driving the way that I was, like I spent a lot of time in my car. So it's like just having to get really like reacquainted with a completely different car and get like all adjusted to that and stuff, which is totally fine. Um, but in the midst of that as well, it kind of became the, I guess, like tipping point at which my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, he said, "Hey, like, I think you should come live with me. We can take care of each other. This will be like better for you. You won't have to pay rent. You can save your money. It'll be more comfortable, et cetera, et cetera." And if you want to share your life with me, and I kind of want to share my life with you, obviously, and I was like, yeah, so we'd been dating for like, I don't know, maybe a month and a half, 2 months at this point. And so I went and moved in with him, which was an hour away, kind of like out in the country, and I still had my office job in the city. So, it really started a season that started with like a big abrupt change, but then um didn't feel like life for a while there didn't feel as chaotic. Like we were still busy. We had lots of things going on during the summer, lots of things that we were doing with friends and family and all kinds of fun stuff. But being away from the city really calmed a lot of the chaos, and being able to spend more time kind of out in the country away from busyness, especially because I'm an intuitive empath, it really spurred this season of allowing me to like have a summer season while nature was having her summer season, in that I was able to like breathe and stretch out and enjoy the fresh air and explore more of like myself and like my oneness with the earth and the world around me, and really start to lay different kinds of like roots and foundations that I hadn't maybe necessarily considered before that. And and then that season kind of led into the point where we were fixing our house and then putting it up on the market for selling, and then moving somewhere else where we're not in the city, but we're in the suburbs, so we're not in the country anymore either. We're in the suburbs now. Um and in the midst of all that, like getting married and then taking a trip to visit my family in Texas, and that kind of like fall rolling into winter, and thankfully like the winter outside, the mother nature winter, has been really pretty mild up until um the last few days, honestly, which is unheard of for Wisconsin, but I'm super grateful for it because a huge part of like what spurred me to have this whole theme of embracing your seasons as this episode is that like winter for me traditionally is super uncomfortable and not really my favorite thing at all because I go outside and it's cold. It's so cold and it's windy and it's cloudy and gray, and it just all feels so constricting. And I totally know and honor and love that Mother Nature is having her process, right? Like she is just resting and pouring all kinds of good water on herself so that like when it melts in the early spring, it helps decompose all of, the leaves and the dead flowers and the seeds and the pine cones and all that kind of good stuff that like falls on the earth. Like having all this water on top of it, especially in the heavier layers with the snow, it helps compact it down and it helps it decompose so that it can basically nourish and become good nourishment for the soil, which helps, all of the new life and the new growth to, come up and blossom and bloom in the spring and the summer. And so, like, I honor and love and appreciate all that. And yet, like, for me to experience it has never been my favorite thing at all. It all feels so constricting and so cold, and like everyone's inside all the time, which means then everyone is getting sick all the time. And I just like, there's not really a whole lot about it that I've enjoyed. So you could say that not only physical winter, but even different aspects of my own, like internal winters, are seasons in my life that until recently I've just kind of tolerated. I've just tolerated. And I've just like accepted that they are there and there's not really a whole lot that I can do about them, right? So when I am talking about my internal winters, I'm talking about all, any and all kinds of seasons where I have to slow down, where I have to kind of pause some of like the manifestations and the external growth in my life and kind of get back to a place where I'm being more reflective, where I'm physically slowing down, where I'm recovering and recuperating and kind of, just letting my body rest and letting my heart and my mind go more inward. Not that I am unfamiliar or uncomfortable at all with like inward reflection and meditation. It's like largely what I've built my life and my business on, and a huge part of what I help my clients do for sure. But at the same time, again, when it's kind of like the forced slowing down, so it's like when I'm having really uncomfortable menstrual cycles, or when my joints are really achy, or when I've pulled a muscle, when I'm having really bad migraines, so it's mostly physical when I'm kind of forced to slow down. But those types of kind of like internal winters, like the times when I just kind of have to slow down, it's a thing that I've tolerated and not really appreciated or enjoyed at all, at all, because I'm very on the go and I very much love and appreciate the seasons where I can expand my reach, where I can be active, like physically, but also in my environment and with my community, and I can be out there and active, and I can be pursuing kind of like the next level of my potential energy, and how I can, connect with more people and all that kind of wonderful, beautiful stuff that my life is built on and my business is built on. So it's really hard for me, or it has been really hard for me to go beyond tolerating those seasons and actually kind of shift to a place where I'm embracing them. And, if you're anything like me, I'm guessing it's been a challenge for you too. So maybe this is just as much for you as it is for me. I hope that the rest of this episode is filled with all kinds of, other insights that I've gained over the last several months of this integration period of moving away from tolerating and moving into a space of embracing the different seasons of life. So, here, I guess I would say is is kind of like the big thing that everybody wants, right? Is we all want that expansion. We all want growth. We all want freedom. We want peace. We want flow. We want everything to just flow and be great in life. But we will never have that if we're too busy fighting with the season that we're in, or if we're too busy ignoring it or pushing it away. If we have seasons where we're swimming against the current, then we will never receive the lessons and the blessings that that season is trying to bring us, that that season is trying to reveal to us, right? So every season we're in, no matter how unwanted or uncomfortable it may feel at the time, it's so important that we receive it as if we had wanted it. Receive it as if it were a good friend kind of coming to our front door, like, hey, here I am, you know, and we give that season a great big hug, and oh, thank you so much for stopping by and for reminding me, what it is that I care about most. Thank you so much for stopping by and reminding me where my heart is at, for helping me realign my actions to my intentions, right? Like, it's so important that we have to be present with the season that we're in, spend time with it and listen to it so that we can, again, so that it can reveal its lessons and its blessings to us, right? And so here are two things that we have to know about the way that life seasons work. The first thing is that all seasons pass eventually. And I think that kind of makes me giggle a little bit, because it's like when you're in the season of discomfort, of like whatever that is that's uncomfortable for you and you don't want to have to deal with it, it feels like it takes forever to go by. And you're like, I'm just ready to be in this better place where things can go back to peace and flow. And like, again, like you want to almost like, quote unquote, go back to the way things were in a way. But we have to remember that all seasons pass. The comfortable and the uncomfortable, the planned and the unplanned, the wanted and the unwanted, right? All seasons passed. So that means inherently that it's up to us to make the most of whatever season we're in. Or the alternative, I guess, is to, be miserable, right? Like, I've been in my own internal winters, and even in Mother Nature winters, just like, nope, it doesn't exist. Like, nope, I don't want to look at the weather. I don't want to see how cold it's going to be today. Nope, I'm going to pretend like my period ain't going to come this month. I'm just going to pretend like I can keep, going to the gym and lifting as heavy as I've been lifting the last week. I'm going to pretend like I don't need to spend 2 days on the couch. I'm just going to, until that thing comes around. And you have to do it anyway. Some things you just kind of have to do. You just have to endure it. But again, there's the difference between enduring and tolerating versus embracing. So all seasons, they come and they go, right? They all pass. And the second thing we have to know, kind of like rolling up into that, is that the point of all seasons, again, no matter how wanted or unwanted they are in the time, the point of all seasons that we go through is elevation, right? Because that is Creator's goal for us. And in every soul, in every lifetime, our soul's kind of like big overarching purpose in this lifetime is to elevate. And as we can see already, a lot of that elevation is not necessarily just internal or external, it's usually both. And here's like a really good example, if I haven't given you enough already, a really good example of some of the ways that like one season spread out over a period of years actually creates like a ripple effect of other smaller seasons within it, that when approached with kind of like the attitude and intention of growth and betterment of ourselves that that we accomplish that level of elevation, right? So when I was much younger, I had a really hard time like communicating my thoughts and my feelings and my needs and my wants. Like I don't mean like I had a speech impairment of any kind. I just mean that a lot of times like I okay, so I've always been an intuitive empath, so like there's that, and I've also always been a dreamer. Like I've always had dreams that showed me the future, like psychic dreams, right? And um so a lot of times when I would experience things, like experience thoughts and feelings, especially, I felt them really big. I felt really big feelings. And with those big feelings came really big thoughts. And then you can imagine, like, once I became a teenager and like my like hormonal moon cycles started coming on, that like a lot of those thoughts and feelings got even bigger and bigger. And yet, like, I had never been taught how to separate like my feelings from someone else's. I had never been taught how to separate my intuition from someone else's. I had never been taught anything about how acceptable it is or isn't to have psychic dreams and what to do with that knowledge, that information that comes to you earlier than it happens. And like, okay, is this something that I should be trying to avoid, or should I just try to let it happen? Like, what am I even doing? And so communication for me was like a really big struggle, like through a lot of my childhood. But as I mean, naturally, as you get older and you become more literate and all, you read more books and all that kind of good stuff, your vocabulary starts to expand and you start to be able to elevate your communication with your elevated vocabulary and all that kind of good stuff. But it goes beyond that, right? Like at some point, you kind of realize it takes an elevated level of consciousness to be able to like truly find the right words for what you're experiencing and to be able to communicate and feel and believe that you are not your thoughts or your feelings. So then you can say, I think this, I feel this, I'm experiencing this, instead of saying, I am this, right? Like you can say, I'm just feeling kind of anxious today, instead of being like, oh yeah, I'm really anxious, right? Like words have so much power. And that's why I wanted to give this example of communication, because words are so powerful in the way that you express things both to yourself and to the outside world. So powerful, and it has such a magnetism to it and a ripple effect into manifestation. Man, let me tell you, it's powerful stuff. So, short story long, the more that I started to elevate my communication, the better of a communicator that I started to become, the more that I was able to come to a place of authenticity, of being like, okay, this is what I'm thinking and feeling. This is not who I am. So who am I actually? Right. And then being able to, being able to elevate my lifestyle based on that knowing of my identity of who I actually am. Right. So that authenticity led to, I mean, all kinds of things that elevate your lifestyle in a number of different ways. And again, some of them are, things you intended and things that you didn't intend. One of the biggest things I can definitely say about stepping more into your authenticity is that hands down, you will always see people come and go from your life. And that happens naturally over time anyway, as we, grow and expand. But especially when you start to get really truthful with yourself and deep into your authenticity, and you start really setting some clear boundaries and elevating your standards and trading standards for expectations and all that kind of stuff, like really shifts a lot of things in your world around. And you start to say, okay, these are things that I'm no longer willing to accept, and these are the things that I won't accept until they've reached this certain level, perhaps. So that leads, all the way around to a higher quality lifestyle. So it leads to better quality relationships. It leads to better jobs and careers. It leads to a healthier body temple, hopefully. It leads to healthier mind, healthier spirit, more expansive spirit, right? So that all stems from communication, right? So it's like this long season of elevating communication, which probably will never end, but it creates all of these other separate little like drops in the pond that have their own ripple effect, that spark their own little seasons of life. And so when we look at that example, and hopefully right now you're also kind of got like your wheel spinning and you're thinking about like some of the own seasons in your life where you can see some similar patterns, right? Like I am always thinking in terms of like these two questions, right? What am I experiencing and what am I doing about it? And through these different seasons and the way that we identify our experiences and what we're going to do about it, naturally, we go through the seasons of internal growth and external manifestation. We go through the seasons of waxing and waning. We go through seasons of gathering and then purging. We go through seasons of being still and then moving, of observing and then doing, of contraction and expansion, right? And so there's often within those seasons kind of the call for us to exercise a pretty high level of discernment and decision, right? So even just going back to that whole like, oh, wait a second, like I'm not anxious. I might just be feeling anxious in the moment, right? Like that's a discernment, and that's a huge discernment that I actually help a lot of my clients have right there. Is like I am not my body and I'm not my mind. I'm not my thoughts. I'm not my feelings. I know who I am, and it's not that. So that discernment that you can have between who you are and what you're experiencing and then what you're going to do about it. And like the really big key thing in there is that what you're going to do with or about your experience is based on who you decide that you are. Right? It's very much based on your identity, whether you're actively conscious of it or not. And I think a lot of times we go through seasons of life where we experience a lot of stress, right? A lot of distress, especially. We feel a lot of pressure on us, whether we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, or we feel pressure from friends and family, or we feel pressure from work, from our boss, from the economy, right? Like we feel so much pressure and we're so stressed and we have to be a certain way and we have to get up at a certain time and we have to go to this place and we have to act a certain way when we're at work and we have to run all the errands and do all the things and be superwoman and all this stuff, right? And it's like, it's a lot. It's a lot where then we like lose our sense of identity, and sometimes we come to that place of like, okay, what am I going to do about this thing right now? And we just operate from like a super basic level of like, well, what do I have to do? Right? We operate very much deeply from that root chakra space of like survival mode. What do I absolutely have to do to just survive and get on to the next moment? And it's very much like we live in a reality where we're just very reactive to our current situation, to our current season. And, something that this winter season has like really reminded me very heavily of is that it's so important that we take the time to nurture ourselves every opportunity that we can take, because it allows us to step outside of that field of reactivity, and it gives us the breathing room, the mental, emotional, energetic space to be like, okay, hang on a second. I don't have to answer to this thing right now, but if I did, what would my intention be? Right? Like being able to nurture ourselves and being able to comfortably, safely go inward and be reflective and embrace like that, I guess, aspect of our seasons is the ability to decide and take action with intention, which ultimately means that over time, all of these actions and decisions that are done with intention create a lifestyle for you that is so much more in alignment with what you want it to be and with who you want to be seen as, with who you know you really are and the best version of you. And you just keep building that with all of these super intentional decisions, right? But you can't be intentional like that if you're constantly just operating from that space of like, I just have to survive right now. I just have to get through this, right? If you're just constantly like fighting against a current of like who you are and who you desire to be and what you desire your life to look like, if you're just constantly swimming upstream and like not ever really getting anywhere and not ever taking the time to really embrace what the current or what that season is trying to reveal to you, both about yourself and about your current life, and also about the laws and truths of the universe and the way that they operate in truth in your life, right? Like there's so much to that, and it also begs us to come back to this place of trust. There's so much trust in these seasons. And again, both internal and external, whether that's like, sowing some seeds or seeing the external manifestations of those seeds, like there has to be so much trust that we're doing the best we can with what we have right now. So much trust that we're making the right choices to improve our lives in as great of a way as we possibly can. So much trust that we learned the lesson the last time that it came around, that we can integrate that lesson into our daily lives, and that we can and will choose better next time, right? Because we all know that lessons never come around just once. They come around again to make sure that we've learned the lesson. Or I should say the challenge comes around. The challenge comes back around to make sure that we've learned the lesson, and hopefully we have, but we have to trust ourselves that we have, and we also have to trust that we are in fact making progress, both internally and externally. And sometimes that's really hard to see because it's like, you look at yourself in the mirror every single day, so you don't see how far you've come, you don't see how much you've changed, you don't see how much you've grown and all the progress that you've made. And life, like PSA if you didn't know this already, but life doesn't come with a cheerleading squad. I really wish it did sometimes, like, hey, you're doing so great right now, but it just kind of doesn't. So, so again, we really have to come back to this place of trusting that we are actually making progress, that we are actually moving the needle forward. We have to trust that we are actually better today than we were yesterday. And it might not seem like it in every choice, in every moment. And even when it doesn't, even when we are able to find a little bit of breathing room in life, a little bit of spaciousness in life, a place where we're like, oh yeah, like I'm so grateful, I'm at peace, everything is working out, all the pieces are just like falling into place, right? Like everything is just flowing and vibing and doing great. Like, guess what? Seasons pass. And so there will be a season at some point that may cause you to go back into a space of stress, of pressure, and it might be a better kind of stress or a better kind of pressure than what you faced previously. Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully your life gets better over time. And so, now instead of it's like the pressure to pay your bills, now it's like the pressure of like, oh man, I'm going to be on Joe Rogan's podcast tomorrow. Like, this is kind of a big deal, like hopefully the kinds of stresses and pressures that we experience over time kind of like get better also, but that doesn't mean that stress doesn't exist, right? And so again, if we come back to that space of embracing, then we can go, you know what, like, yeah, this is kind of stressful, but it's way better than it used to be, and I am way better than I used to be. And if I just keep moving forward, if I just keep doing what I've been doing, if I keep following this process, if I keep following my joy, if I keep embracing this season and paying attention to what it's trying to show me and teach me about myself and about my life, then I can trust that the next phase of my life is going to be even better than the last one. And for those of you who are, into spirituality and any aspect of like universal laws and manifestation, that also means that trusting that the universe always, always, always has your back. Always. And that can be kind of hard because, again, when we get in these moments of stress, we're like, well, what the fuck is this? Things were going so good, and then this challenge, and I don't get it. And that was actually another one of those things that has been part of me embracing this season, right? And I said it at the beginning of this episode, is like, I've been having so many technical challenges. Like last week I sat down to record an episode, and it wasn't meant to be, because I was actually going to record the first episode about choosing standards over expectations and all that kind of good stuff. And my recording software would not work. It was not working at all. Like, I was getting so frustrated. I like tried all the things, and I mean, I was on my laptop for a good 2 hours at least, like just trying to make it work, and I could not make it work. And then I went to my husband and I started crying, and I was like, if the universe really wanted me to do this, I just feel like the universe could make this a little bit easier. And he was like, yeah, I know it feels that way, but like, if you're not met with a little bit of resistance, then you're running the wrong way into battle. And I was like, well, fine then. But that's totally the truth. That's totally the truth. And the truth behind that, again, is that like, you have to trust that Creator is always working in your highest favor. So even though what you thought you were going to do today maybe didn't work out, that doesn't mean that you're being derailed. That doesn't mean you're being attacked. That doesn't mean that you're doing the wrong thing, or that there's something wrong with you, or that you're not worthy of the results that you're seeking to create, right? It just means that Creator had a different plan, and guess what? It's a better plan. And the other thing about that is that we don't get to decide how our sowed seeds become manifestations. We don't get to decide how, and we don't get to decide when. We just get to know that if we sow the seeds and they are based on intentions of love and of growth and of expansion and betterment for ourselves and raising the vibration of our community and the world around us, that they are meant to come to fruition. And then we just give that to Jesus, and we're like, okay, you take the wheel on this. Like, I sowed the seed, and I'll take aligned action. I'll do what I need to do to nurture it, but you got to have my back. Right? And so, like, this podcast episode that you're listening to today is no different, right? Like, had my podcasting software last week not been working, you would be listening to a very different message today. And maybe you'll listen to the whole thing about expectations again later on, but that's not what was meant to be sent out to you. And it wasn't meant to be sent out to you last week, or it would have worked, right? Today, everything is working. I've got a new software. I've got new setup. I've got a new desk that I'm sitting at that I'm like so excited about, because I made it out of, my husband actually made it out of a reclaimed antique door that came out of a bread factory nearby that was built in the 1800s. It's super cool, so like I'm physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually in a much better place to offer you some insight today. And the content of the insight that I'm offering for you today is so much different than what I would have offered to you last week. And it all worked out, hopefully not only for my higher good, but for yours as well. And so that kind of leads up to like that next, I guess, like element of embracing the season you're in, which is kind of coming full circle into integration, right? Like, and it really goes very much hand in hand with the aspect of trusting, right? And I think I alluded to it kind of like in the beginning of this episode, but when we follow our joy and we embrace all the seasons and manifestations are coming to fruition and life gets so good, it's so easy to look around for like the next shoe to drop. It's so easy for us to be so programmed, right? Like as we're so programmed to be busy, as we're so programmed to live stressful lives, right? Like we're so programmed to exist in a comfort zone of mediocrity, right? Where like some things can get better, but that means other things get worse, or things can get better for a little while, but that's not going to last forever, and then it's going to get worse again, right? It's like, it's almost like we have this ceiling of how good things can get, which is totally an illusion and doesn't exist. And I think we all know this logically, but overcoming it spiritually and energetically is a whole nother thing entirely. And that's where integration comes in, of like, not only are we integrating the lessons, but we're also integrating the blessings. We're very much integrating the ability to receive, the ability to allow, the ability to just be in this next level of life that we have co-created with the universe, and appreciate it and know that it's not the end of the line and that things aren't going to go back to being worse, but things are actually going to get better. And if we truly believe it and allow it to happen and to flow into our lives and to exist, things will actually get even way better than we can ever imagine. Like when my boyfriend died 3 years ago, I did not believe that 3 years later I would be with my true soulmate and that I would be married and that I would be building my business full time. Like, I would not have believed that any of that was true at all. But it all happened simply by embracing my grief at the time. It started by embracing my grief. It started by embracing the fact that I had to live like 1 hour at a time, and then 1 day at a time, and then 1 week at a time, and then 1 month at a time. And then I eventually got to a place where I could start to see how different pieces of my life were actually coming together, and they never would have had that situation not happened, had my last boyfriend not passed away. Like, that was actually not only serving his higher good, it served my higher good too. And coming to that realization was like a really hard thing, but it's so true. And if I can believe that that's true and know that Creator always has our back and is always working in our highest good from that place where I was 3 years ago, then you can believe it too. You can believe it always, right? There are, so many other people's stories too that I could reference, and I don't want to name names, but just as another reference point for you, like I know that there are a few people in this world that I love very dearly, and they are some of the best people. Like, they're so wholesome, they're so grateful for everything, they're so giving, they're so generous, and their lives are so abundant and so beautiful and so prosperous. And some of them just 5 years ago, some of them 10 years ago, some of them more, struggled with things like addiction, struggled with things like suicidal tendencies, struggled with things like abusive romantic relationships, abusive marriages, physically and mentally. And, so it's just such a testament that our perception of not being able to have more than what we currently have is so not true. So not true. But you'll never see that if you don't just kind of like embrace where you're at and come back to those two questions that I said before. What am I currently experiencing and what am I going to do about it? Right? How am I going to go with this current and acknowledge where Spirit is trying to take me next and receive that and take action in alignment with that and appreciate that and just go with it. And I can tell you that for me, at the beginning of last year, it started when on the first new moon of 2023, I sat down and I had a good conversation with Spirit and I said, okay, Spirit, I'm going to go wherever you want me to go this year. And it brought me here. And I couldn't be more grateful. I couldn't be more fulfilled. Life couldn't be greater, couldn't be better. And now here I am sharing this with all of you guys. And to me, it's just completely amazing. And I'm so grateful. And I hope, again, that this inspires you to see that within yourself too, and empowers you to embrace your season and to take action in alignment with that, and to know always that you are meant for so much more. You're always meant for so much more. It's coded within you. I want you to remember that you are consciousness embodied so that Creator can express itself as you. And if that's not a damn good reason to honor and embrace whatever season you're in, then I don't know what is. But only you can embrace and integrate your seasons in the ways that you know how. So thank you so much again for tuning into this week's episode. I hope you found it inspiring and helpful and empowering. If you found any kind of a good value in it, make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you'll get notified every time a new episode is out. Please share it with anyone you believe will also get value from it, so together we can raise the vibration and the consciousness of the universe. Remember, you're meant for more. It's coded within you. Your power, your authenticity, your native growth. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great and beautiful weekend. Mwah.